Here we go!
Welcome to the Nintendo Power Zone, and this is your 16-bit news. So guys, we have one major story today, and we really have to talk about this because it's one that's industry-wide. This won't just affect Nintendo, it's going to affect Microsoft and Sony as well, so this is really big news. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just dive right into it. You guys know I like to keep my politics out of my video games, but the proposed tariffs that the Trump administration wants to place against China, it has consequences for the video game industry as a whole. Today, all three major console manufacturers have written a joint letter to the Trump administration dealing with the potential windfall these tariffs would have on the video game industry if they were to go into effect. The letter, which is available in its entirety on regulations.gov, states the following. Dear Mr. Barloon, Microsoft Corporation, Microsoft, Nintendo of America Inc., Nintendo, and Sony Interactive Entertainment LLC, SIE, respectfully submit these joint written comments in response to the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, USTR's, request for public comments regarding products imported from China that could be subject to tariffs pursuant to USTR's Section 301 investigation of Chinese acts, policies, and practices related to technology transfer, intellectual property, IP, and innovation. At the outset, we note that we support the Entertainment Software Association's ESA's submission requesting removal of a broader range of video gaming related harmonized tariff schedule of the United States HTSUS subheadings from the final tariff list as leading video game console manufacturers. We submit this separate submission to highlight the enormous impact and undue economic harm that proposed tariffs on the video game consoles would have on the entire video game ecosystem. In particular, tariffs on video game consoles would injure consumers, video game developers, retailers, and console manufacturers, put thousands of high-value, rewarding U.S. jobs at risk, and stifle innovation in our industry and beyond. While we appreciate the administration's effort to protect U.S. intellectual property and preserve U.S. high-tech leadership, the disproportionate harm caused by these tariffs to U.S. consumers and businesses will undermine, not advance, these goals. Accordingly, we respectfully request the administration remove HTSUS subheading 9504.50.00 covering video game consoles from the final list of tariffs and thus refrain from applying tariffs on these products. The letter then goes on to state how the video game industry positively affects the United States economically, not just in terms of sales, but how the three combined companies provide jobs for over 8,000 employees across the United States, including high-value tech and high-tech research and development roles, and creative design and coding jobs in video game development studios. Moving on, the letter continues to highlight how detrimental moving manufacturing away from China could be. In 2018, over 96% of video game consoles imported to the United States were made in China. The video game industry console supply has developed in China over many years of investment by our companies and our partners. It would cause significant supply chain disruption to shift sourcing entirely to the United States or a third country, and it would increase costs even beyond the cost of the proposed tariffs on products that are already manufactured under tight margin conditions. Each video game console comprises dozens of complex components sourced from multiple countries. A change in even a single supplier must be vetted carefully to mitigate risks of product quality, unreliability, and consumer safety issues. Tariffs would significantly disrupt our company's businesses and add significant costs that would depress the sales of video game consoles and the games and services that drive the profitability of this market segment. The letter then discusses the strain the tariffs would have on consumers. Video games are a core part of the fabric of American entertainment culture. 2 out of 3 households have at least one video game player, and 60% of Americans play video games daily. A price increase of 25% will likely put a new video game console out of reach for many American families, who we expect to be in the market for a console this holiday season. For those purchases that do go forward despite tariffs, consumers would pay $840 million more than they otherwise would have, according to a recent study prepared for the Consumer Technology Association by the independent economic group Trade Partnership. The study also noted that even after accounting for new tariff revenue, the result is a net $350 million loss for the U.S. economy for each year the tariffs remain in effect, with the burden being carried by U.S. consumers. The letter then continues to discuss how imposing these new tariffs would hinder innovation. The proposed tariffs on consoles would also impair our companies' and games developers' ability to innovate further, materially undermining this investigation's goal of protecting American intellectual property rights, innovation, and technology development. There would be ripple effects extending far beyond the video game industry. Because the video game industry has historically and persistently been a leader in US technology innovation in both hardware and software spaces, beyond the game industry, Microsoft, Nintendo, and SIE collectively invest billions of dollars in research and development in the US to develop and deliver inventive consoles and next-generation technology to our consumers. Microsoft, for instance, has over 2,000 issued pending US patents for innovations originally created for gaming. Instituting tariffs would lead to reduced R&D investment as console makers scale back on revolutionary new technologies. Finally, the letter closes by stating, imposing tariffs on video game consoles would not be practical or effective to attain elimination of China's problematic IP practices. Although we appreciate the administration's goal of strengthening the protection of IP in China, video game consoles are not priorities in any Chinese industrial policies, e.g. made in China. Indeed, Chinese developed and branded video game consoles are virtually non-existent. One video game console that launched in 2016 has not been well received by the market. Moreover, because margins are tight due to the nature of our business model, incentives to steal IP make counterfeit consoles are exceptionally weak. Video game consoles are also relatively complex types of equipment, so the amount of effort and cost required to manufacture infringing or legitimate products would not be justified by potential returns. We appreciate the administration's consideration of this request that tariffs not be applied on HTS US subheading 9504.50.00 covering video game consoles, and therefore that this subheading will not be included in the final fourth list of products subject to Section 301 tariffs. So guys, that is a whole lot to consume, but essentially what Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony are trying to tell us is that if these tariffs were to go into effect, this would adversely affect the video game industry as a whole. This will affect the people who work for these companies. This will affect us as consumers. This will affect retailers. And we already know that certain retailers are already having a very hard time as we make the shift to digital content, such as GameStop. So as you guys can see, if these tariffs were to go into effect, it would shake the industry as a whole. At the MPZ, we mostly stay away from politics, but when all three major players in the industry come together to make a statement of any kind, it should go without saying that this is really important news. So guys, what are your thoughts on this? I really have to know. Are you guys worried about how this could potentially affect you as a consumer, how this affects maybe you as an employee for, either a retailer, or maybe you work for one of these companies and these tariffs scare the living daylights out of you? I need to know your thoughts, so hit us up in the comment section and let us know what you think. Moving into our next story, the Pokemon Company released an 8-minute presentation highlighting their latest and upcoming Pokemon mobile game, Pokemon Masters. The presentation opened with a beautiful anime that detailed the region and style of the mobile game. After a brief introduction from Pokemon Company President Mr. Ishihara, Yu Sasaki of DeNa and the producer of the game started to go into details on the mobile title. Before we go on, can we just state that Mr. Sasaki, you have the best fro in all of Japan. Alright, moving on. Starting with the region, Pasio is the setting of this new game, and it is an artificial island. Within the island of Pasio, trainers are pursuing the goal of becoming champion of the Pokemon Masters League. While on the island, trainers only have access to one Pokemon who travels alongside them as their partner. Together, the Pokemon and trainer are called a sync pair. As the player travels through the story, they will encounter trainers from past mainline Pokemon games, and upon meeting them, they can team up with these other sync pairs. In order to challenge the Pokemon Masters League, the sync pairs must collect badges as they progress through the story, though no details have been given as to how many badges the player needs to collect. As far as gameplay is concerned, all battles are 3v3 real-time matches, which is a dramatic shift from the turn-based combat found in the mainline games. In order to attack, players must use the move gauge, which fills as time passes. This is very reminiscent of the active time battle seen in games like Final Fantasy VII. This game also has special attacks called sync moves, which seem to be this game's version of the Z-move, Mega Evolutions, and Dynamax mechanics from prior Pokemon games. Another noteworthy alteration to the typical Pokemon gameplay style is the fact that Pokemon trainers will also have the ability to perform moves which can either heal or raise their Pokemon's stats. The presentation closed with Mr. Sasaki stating that the game will release in the summer of 2019 for both Android and iOS, but no firm release date was given. Notably absent was any discussion as to whether or not the game will feature online or local PvP modes. We'll keep you up to date on any breaking news regarding the release of Pokemon Masters. What's especially interesting about this mobile title though is the fact that this partnership between DeNa and the Pokemon Company is outside the scope of the deal that Nintendo has made with DeNa to produce mobile titles. This could be a relationship built on synergy though, as Nintendo owns part of the Pokemon franchise and about 10% of DeNa. So what do you guys think of Pokemon Masters now that we've had our first major look at the game? Hit us up in the comment section and let us know what you think. But guys, that's going to go ahead and wrap up our 16-bit news for the week of June 24th, 2019. Before we let you go, we got to hit you up with these social media links. You can hit me up on Twitter at NyceOne983. You can email me at NyceOne983@gmail.com. You can hit me up on Facebook, Facebook.com/Nintendo Power Zone. If you are a fan of the Nintendo Power Zone podcast, you can always download new episodes on iTunes, Google Play Music, stream new episodes on Spotify and Stitcher Radio. But if you want to watch the show live, you got to catch us right here on YouTube, youtube.com/Nintendo Power Zone. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, stay fresh. Deuces.
Here we go!